Today I want to show you how to create an animated GIF such as this one. In this one I created the artwork with the dog and the fox in Illustrator, and then I brought those images into Photoshop in order to create the animated effect of the fox jumping over the dog. So let's take a look at what I started with. This is the animated GIF, and then we can look at the original art, which is an AI Illustrator file. Then if we look at the layered files, after I brought them into Photoshop, I converted them into PNG files, and then I combined all these different PNG files with the fox in different positions of jumping over the dog into a single Photoshop file with layers. So let's go ahead and look at that file in Photoshop. I have the fox jumping Photoshop file opened in Photoshop, and I'm going to open up the layers, just going to Window, Layers, and then you can see all of my layers placed there. So I have probably about 14 layers here with the original layer. If I hide these other layers, we can start from the first layer of just the dog and the text. Then we have the fox starting to jump over the dog, and then the different positions of the fox as it's jumping over the dog. And I really could have made more layers instead of ending as abruptly as I did with the fox in midair. I probably should have had him slowly taper off the page. I want to go to Window and then open up my timeline. So select Timeline from your window, and then make sure that you can see the hamburger menu or the option menu on the right side. Click on that. That will give you some more options that we will utilize. I'm going to delete these layers in the timeline right now so you can see what it'll look like on your screen when you start off. You won't have any layers here. After you have all of your layers created, then you'll use the option menu and select Make Frames from Layers. Once you do that, it will take all of your layers and make them into these animated frames on your timeline, and then you can create your animation that way. So you can set a time lapse for each frame. Right now I have the first frame with just the dog set to 0.2 seconds, and then all my other frames are set to 0 seconds because I don't want there to be any time lapse there. So if I play this animation, we can see the fox jumping over the dog. And if I wanted to slow down the time, I could change that to 0.1 second for each layer, and then select or hit the key Shift to select multiple layers, and then I can select 0.1 seconds for all of those in between, and then play, and now I can see that slow down my fox jumping over the dog a little bit. So I can play around with the timing that way. Then when I'm ready to export the file, I would just go to File, Export, and then select Save for Web Legacy. And then I'm just going to select the preset, the standard default GIF 128 dithered. And before you save it or export it, you can check the preview. You can select your browser and preview it in your browser to see what it's going to look like before you export it. So that's what it's going to look like. So if I'm ready to export and save, I can go ahead and click Export and then save it with a name. And I won't be able to view the animation unless I view it on my desktop where I have it saved. So I'm going to go to the desktop where I have it saved, and then I can click on the file, and then I can see the animation. If I were just to open this up in Photoshop like I have here, I won't be able to view the animation in Photoshop. So you would have to view it this way. Once you place it onto your website and you embed it that way, then you would be able to see the animation working on your site. Going back to Photoshop, I want to start from the beginning to show you how I pieced all of this together. So I'm going to open up a new file. First, I'm going to go to File, Open, and open the artwork from Illustrator. And so it's going to open it up just as a Photoshop PDF. Because I did it in Illustrator, it will place it onto a transparent background, which is what I want. And I'm just going to leave these default settings right now. So now it's going to place it into a document in Photoshop onto a transparent background. And I can go to image size and I'm going to select, right now I've got pixels, about 1400 pixels. I want to change my resolution to 96, and you can make it higher than 96 if you want. You can go with 200. If you want it lower, you can keep it at the default 72, but I'm just going to stick with 96 right now. And actually, I'm going to reset that because before I change it, I want to uncheck resample, change it to 96, and then check resample so that I can view the pixels again. So I want to keep it at about 1400 pixels. And then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to create a new file, going to File, New. And you can use a default standard for web. If you want to use the most common size, you can select that here. It's going to give you the size in pixels and resolution. I'm just going to change that to 96 so it's consistent. You can also select a different background color. So I'm going to switch to a black background in this case and hit Create. Now I have my background layer, and I'm going to create a new layer in Photoshop to place my artwork in. So I'm going to go back to the fox artwork. I am just going to copy by doing Command C, and then I'm going to paste it into this new file into my layer 2. And it is bigger than the document size, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key and just drag it until it fits. So I'm going to try to keep it proportional. And then I can start modifying and making some edits here. So I want one layer with just the dog on it. I'm going to select this layer and I'm going to duplicate it. That way if I mess up, I always have the original one. So I'm going to select Duplicate Layer. And now I have two layers with the same thing. And I'm going to move this layer up with and then my background layer. So on my first layer with the artwork on it, I want just the dog. So then I can just select the fox and just delete it. And now if you look in the layers, if I hide this other layer, I have a layer with just the dog on it. Then I can go to the layer with the dog and the fox, and I can move the fox to a different position. So let me grab, and you can use a quick selection tool or mask or whatever tool you prefer in Photoshop. I'm going to use the Move tool to move this fox down here. So I want to duplicate this layer. Okay, then for my second layer with the fox on it, I'm going to move my fox to a different position. And then I'm going to hide the other layer with the fox on it and drag that down under layers. Then I can go back to this fox. I'm going to duplicate it again. So now I want to select this fox, use the Move to move it onto a different position. So as if it is jumping, and I can hide this layer and take a look at how it would look in the animation. So if I see this first and then I see this layer. Okay, so now I've got a layer with just the dog, then a layer with the dog and the fox for reference that I'm going to hide right now. And then I have a layer with the fox on the right side of the page coming into the page. Then I have it moving across the page. And then I'm going to duplicate this one again. And actually, let me duplicate this one again. And this time I want to create a layer. I'm going to hide these other ones with just the entire fox. So I'm going to delete the dog. And that way I can isolate the fox on one layer. Then I can have duplicate that layer. So I'm going to duplicate the layer with just the fox on it. Then I'm going to move that up. Then I'm going to go to the layer with just the fox on it, duplicate it again, move it up, and then move that fox over. Just a little bit more. Go back to the original fox and keep duplicating it and moving it up to the top. Actually, I don't need this transparent layer, so I'm going to delete that. Make this visible, and then I can move that over a little bit more. I'm going to start moving it down a little bit this time. Then duplicate this layer. Now I've got the entire fox on the page, so I can duplicate that layer, move it down. I'm going to duplicate it again, and move it down until it is completely jumping over the dog. And I know it looks weird right now, but I'm going to go back and hide those other layers so that we can see the animation. Alright, so I think that's good for now. Then I'm going to hide these layers so we can see how this is going to work. So it's going to start with the dog, and then the fox will start to jump over the dog. And I can get rid of the extra layers that I just used to duplicate it. And now I'm ready to make my animation. So now I've got all these layers. And how many layers do I have here? So I actually have about 10 layers total because I deleted those 2 extra ones. Now I'm going to go to create my frame animation. So I'm going to click create frame animation in my timeline. Go to my options menu and select make frame from layers. And then I can play. Oh, and I can see that I actually need to keep the dog in all the layers. So I need to go back and place that dog into each layer. So I'm going to copy my dog and put it back into each layer. So I should have just kept it in each layer instead of deleting it. And what I could do is just duplicate the layer with the dog. So I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be, but I'm going to merge these 2 layers together rather than pasting them again. Alright, so I finally was able to combine all the dogs back in, the dog image back in with the fox and merge those together, and now I just need to bring back the original layer with the black background. So I'm going to go to edit fill and choose black and fill that background and move that to the beginning, and then I can play my animation. So I see it's not perfect because my dog got moved around since I didn't have it placed in the right place in the beginning. I'm going to change this to 0.1 seconds. So it's a little bit slower. And then if I needed to, I'm going to stop that. You could select, I have mine selected on a forever loop, but you could also select it to play 1 time or 3 times or set amount. And I'm just going to go back and try to move my dog over so it matches each frame. And then I can go back and export it just like I did before and export to legacy as the animated GIF. So I'm going to go ahead and go to export, save for legacy, and then I can preview the animation, and then I can go ahead and save it. And then view it on my desktop.